Human waste. That's what you are, Dad. You contaminate my life just by existing. This nursing home will be your tomb. Those were the words of my son Ethan as he dragged me down the cold hallways of the Pines on my 72nd birthday. I never imagined the special outing he promised would end like this. Before we continue, subscribe to William's Revenge Stories. Hit the notification bell because we have new stories every day. Leave your like and tell us in the comments what city you're watching from. My name is Andrew Carter, and today, as I look at the old photographs in my new apartment in a quiet neighborhood, I still find it hard to believe that my own son, the person I dedicated 45 years of sacrifice to, could transform into the cruel man who locked me up as if I were trash. But to understand how we reached this point, I must return to that Tuesday, March 17th, 2024, the day of my 72nd birthday. I woke up that morning with the naive hope of an old man who still believed in a son's love. Ethan had called me 3 days earlier, unusually cheerful, promising he had prepared the best gift of my life. His voice sounded different, almost enthusiastic. I understand now that it was the excitement of someone about to free himself from a burden. Dad, on Tuesday I'll pick you up at 10 inches the morning. Dress well, we're going somewhere very special, he had said. I remember perfectly how my heart filled with foolish hope. Maybe, I thought, we could finally reconnect. The last 5 years had been distant, ever since he inherited his mother's company, my late wife Beatrice, who passed away 7 years ago. That morning I bathed carefully, I shaved, I put on my best light blue shirt and the gray pants I saved for important occasions. I made coffee and waited by the window of my apartment in our wealthy downtown district, watching the street. At 10 o'clock sharp, Ethan's black Audi stopped in front of the building. I went down with a smile on my face. My son got out of the car, dressed in a dark suit and red tie. He hugged me briefly, a mechanical hug that I should have recognized as an alarm signal, but I was blinded by illusion. "Happy birthday, Dad. Today will be a day you'll never forget," he said with a smile that I interpreted as affection then. How right he was, though not in the way I imagined. During the 1-hour drive to the outskirts of the city, I tried to talk. I asked about Sarah, my 19-year-old granddaughter, about the business, about Natalie, his wife. He responded with monosyllables, his gaze fixed on the road. I attributed his silence to work stress. How naive I was. I noticed strange little things. Ethan constantly checked his watch, drummed his fingers on the steering wheel impatiently, and when I tried to turn on the radio, he practically slapped my hand to turn it off. "I prefer silence," he said harshly. I swallowed hard, uncomfortable, but I kept quiet. We started to climb a winding road into the hills. The landscape was beautiful. Trees on both sides, clear blue sky. But something in my stomach began to twist. We passed a sign that said the Pines Geriatric Residence, 2 kilometers. I thought maybe Ethan did volunteer work there, that he was taking me to see the place. My mind was still searching for innocent explanations. When the car stopped in front of a 3-story beige building with white bars on the windows, my confusion grew. "What are we doing here, son?" I asked, in the softest voice possible. He turned off the engine, took a deep breath, and for the first time, he looked me directly in the eyes. What I saw in that gaze froze my blood. Absolute coldness, contempt, almost relief. "Dad, this is your new home," he said with terrifying calm. Before I could process his words, he got out of the car, went around the vehicle, opened my door violently, and grabbed my arm forcefully. "Let's go. Don't make this harder." "Ethan, I don't understand. What does this mean? Is this a joke?" My voice was trembling. He didn't answer. He just dragged me towards the entrance. I tried to pull free, but at 72 my strength was no match for his. At the reception, a woman in her 52nds in a white uniform greeted us with a professional but uncomfortable expression. "Mr. Carter?" she asked, looking at Ethan. He nodded. "Yes, I'm bringing my father Andrew Carter for permanent admission. Everything is already arranged." The words permanent admission exploded in my brain like fireworks of horror. "Ethan, what are you saying? I'm not sick." "I don't need to be here," I shouted, trying to break free. The receptionist looked at us uncomfortably, clearly used to these scenes. My son dragged me down a long hallway that smelled of disinfectant and institutional food. I was yelling, demanding explanations, begging him to listen to me. He remained silent, jaw tight, until we reached a small room with a single bed, a metal locker, and a window with bars overlooking a gray inner courtyard. He pushed me inside. Then, finally, he spoke, and his words were burned into my memory forever. Listen to me closely, Dad, because this is the last thing I'll ever say to you. You're worthless now. You are human waste that only contaminates my life with your existence. Every time I see you, every call from you, every obligatory visit, reminds me of everything I could have if you didn't exist. This nursing home is where you belong. Here you will rot until death finally has mercy on me and takes you. I stood paralyzed, unable to breathe. My own son, whose diapers I changed, whom I taught to ride a bike, for whom I worked 70 hours a week for years to pay for his education at the best private prep school in the city, investing $150,000, was looking at me with a hatred I had never seen directed at me. Before I could answer, Ethan advanced towards me and began to rip my belongings away. He took my cell phone from my pants pocket. You won't need this. He took my wallet with my ID, my bank cards, the pictures of Sarah I always carried. Not this either. He even took off the wristwatch Beatrice gave me for our 30th anniversary. Ethan, please, son, let's talk. Whatever I did to upset you, I'm sorry. We can fix this, I begged, tears starting to roll down my cheeks. He laughed, a cruel, hollow laugh, empty of any humanity. Fix it? There's nothing to fix, old man. You just stopped being useful. Goodbye, Dad. Enjoy your living tomb. He left the room and locked the door from the outside. I stood there, in the middle of that cold cell, listening to his footsteps fade down the hall, then the sound of his car engine starting, and finally, silence. I let myself fall onto the bed, my heart shattered into 1,000 pieces. But something strange happened in that moment of absolute despair. My civil engineer's mind, trained for 50 years to analyze structures and problems, began to work with unexpected clarity. I didn't cry uncontrollably. I didn't scream anymore. Instead, I closed my eyes and began to remember, to observe, to record every detail of what had just happened. Ethan's exact words, his body language, the way the receptionist seemed uncomfortable, the fact that my son had said everything is already arranged, as if he had planned this in advance. I opened my eyes and observed the room methodically. The barred window, the locked door, the total absence of my belongings. This was not a misunderstanding. This was a precisely executed plan. And it was in that moment, sitting on that hard bed in a nursing home that smelled of loneliness and abandonment, that I made the most important decision of my life. If my son believed he had destroyed me, if he thought I would give up and die quietly in this geriatric prison, he was deeply mistaken. I would not seek blind revenge. I would seek something much more powerful. The truth, justice, and maybe, just maybe, a lesson my son needed to learn before his soul was completely lost in the darkness. But for that, I would need time, patience, and above all, to keep a cool head. Because if my career as an engineer had taught me anything, it was that the best structures are built with careful planning, not with impulsive reactions. I dried my tears, I took a deep breath, and I began to observe everything around me with new eyes. Not the eyes of a victim, but the eyes of a strategist who had just received the most important challenge of his life. And what Ethan didn't know, what he could never have imagined in his worst nightmares, was that the director of this nursing home, the man who signed the admission papers, was Jacob Jake Miller, my best friend of 43 years. But that, my son would find out very soon. The first few days at the Pines passed with a slowness that would have broken any lesser man. But I, Andrew Carter, had built bridges that supported tons of weight. I knew that true strength isn't measured in screams, but in the ability to maintain lucidity when everything is collapsing. The morning after my confinement, a young nurse entered my room. Her name was Rose Evans, according to her ID. She brought a tray with an institutional breakfast, watery coffee, dry toast, a small packet of jelly. She observed me with that mix of pity and professionalism that she surely applied to all the elderly residents. "Good morning, Mr. Carter. How did you sleep?" she asked in a soft voice. I could have screamed the truth. I could have told her that my son kidnapped me against my will. But something inside me warned me to be strategic. "Good morning, Rose," I replied with a calm that surprised even me. "I could be better, but I appreciate your kindness." She blinked, clearly not expecting coherence from someone who supposedly suffered from severe dementia. During those first 3 weeks, I established a meticulous routine. Every morning I woke up at 6, did light exercises in my room, washed carefully. When the staff came in, I chatted with them politely, asked about their families, remembered their names. I wanted everyone to see that my mind was working perfectly. Rose became my main source of information. One afternoon, While she was bringing me the medication that I pretended to take, but hid under my tongue to spit out later, I asked her casually, "Rose, did my son talk to you when he brought me?" She hesitated, uncomfortable. "Mr. Carter, I shouldn't." "Please," I insisted gently. "I just want to understand what he told you. I have a right to know, don't you think?" She sighed, looking towards the door to make sure no one was listening. "Your son explained to us that you requested to come here voluntarily. He said you had become aggressive lately, that you have violent episodes, that you forgot important things like leaving the stove on. He showed us supposed medical reports indicating advanced Alzheimer's. Every word was a carefully constructed lie. I felt rage boiling in my veins, but I kept my face serene. And what do you think, Rose? Do I seem aggressive or demented to you?" She looked me directly in the eyes for the first time. "Honestly, Mr. Carter, you are the most lucid and kind patient we have in this wing. That's why your file confuses me so much." I smiled sadly. "Thank you for your honesty. It means more than you can imagine." During the long, lonely nights, my mind traveled to the past, searching for answers. Where had I failed as a father? I clearly remembered the day Ethan was born, the 22nd of June, 1979. Beatrice was sweating, exhausted after 14 hours of labor. When the doctor placed that tiny baby in my arms, I cried with happiness. "You will be a great man," I whispered to him. "I promise you." I fulfilled that promise with absolute sacrifice. I worked from 6 inches the morning until 9 at night, 6 days a week. Every dollar I earned as a civil engineer, I invested in giving Ethan the best. Education at the top private prep school, which cost $3,500 a month. Piano lessons, swimming, advanced English, educational trips to London. Adding it all up, I invested $150,000 in his education. But now, analyzing with painful clarity, I saw the mistakes. When Beatrice died 7 years ago from pancreatic cancer, Ethan inherited her textile import company, valued at $500,000. I insisted he take it, thinking it would give him stability. Instead, it gave him power he didn't know how to handle. The changes were gradual. First, the visits became less frequent. Then, the conversations became transactional. "Dad, I need you to sign these papers." "Dad, lend me $40,000 to expand the business." I always agreed, blinded by paternal love. 5 years ago, when Ethan turned 40, I noticed he was different. More arrogant, materialistic, obsessed with appearances. He drove expensive German cars, wore Italian suits, dined at restaurants where a meal cost $200. When I asked him if everything was okay financially, he responded with irritation. "I'm perfectly fine, Dad. Stop treating me like a child." The clearest sign came 2 years ago. Sarah, my granddaughter, came to visit me crying. "Grandpa, Mom, and Dad are fighting all the time about money," Dad says. "He says that you're a burden, that when you're gone, he can sell your properties and live comfortably." I consoled her, thinking they were words spoken in a moment of stress. How naive. Now, locked in this cold room, the pieces of the puzzle fit together with brutal clarity. Ethan didn't admit me for medical concern. He admitted me because I am an obstacle between him and my estate. The 3 commercial properties in a prime downtown area, which I bought with decades of work, valued at $800,000. The $300,000 in investments, the bank accounts with savings I accumulated by living modestly. One afternoon, the 10th day of my confinement, I had a revealing conversation with Linda, another nurse in her 60 seconds. She was cleaning my room while I looked out the barred window. "Mr. Carter," Linda said suddenly, "I've been working in nursing homes for 32 years. I've seen everything. And let me tell you something. You don't belong here. Your gaze is too clear, your movements too steady. What is really going on?" I turned to her, evaluating if I could trust her. I decided to risk it. "Linda, my son brought me here against my will. He took everything from me. Phone, documents, money. He told the staff I'm demented. But, as you can see, I'm not." She nodded slowly. I figured, "Do you have family who can help you? Friends? I have a granddaughter, Sarah. But Ethan probably told her I'm traveling or something. She's studying at the university. She has no way of knowing where I am." I paused. "And I have friends, yes, but without a phone, without any way to contact the outside." Linda interrupted me in a low voice. "The director of this home, Mr. Miller, is a fair man. He makes personal night rounds, checking that everything is in order. Maybe if you talk to him." My heart leaped. "Jake." Jacob Miller. How had I not thought of it before? When Rose mentioned the Pines that first day, the name sounded familiar, but my brain was too traumatized to connect. Now I remembered. Jake had told me years ago that he managed a geriatric residence on the outskirts of the city. Linda, I said urgently, is Mr. Miller's first name Jacob? She nodded. Yes, Jacob Miller. Do you know him? A small smile, the first in days, appeared on my face. Linda, Jake, and I built the Austin Municipal Building together in 1982. We've been friends for 43 years. Linda's eyes lit up. Then there's hope, Mr. Carter. Mr. Miller passes by the rooms around 11 at night. I'll be on watch. When he comes, I'll give you a signal. That night, I waited awake, my heart beating hard. At 11:15, I heard footsteps in the hallway. The door opened gently. A tall man entered, 68 years old, gray hair perfectly combed, metal-framed glasses. He wore a white medical director's coat and carried a clipboard. Our gazes met. I saw his eyes widen with absolute shock, disbelief transforming into recognition. Andrew, he whispered, his voice cracking. Hello, old friend, I replied, with a calm I didn't feel. I suppose we have a lot to talk about. Jake closed the door behind him carefully, making sure no one else was in the hallway. His face had gone from initial shock to a mixture of indignation and absolute confusion. He approached my bed with quick steps, leaving the clipboard on the metal nightstand. Andrew, for God's sake, what the hell are you doing here? He whispered intensely. I reviewed your file 2 hours ago when Linda alerted me that something strange was happening with the patient in room 214. When I saw your full name on the documents, I thought it was a mistake, a coincidence. Andrew Carter can't be admitted to my nursing home as an advanced dementia patient. I saw you 6 months ago at the anniversary of the Austin City Hall construction, and you were perfectly fine. I sat up in bed, gesturing for him to take the only available chair. Sit down, Jake. What I'm about to tell you is hard to believe, but I need you to listen to me until the end without interrupting. He dropped into the chair, taking off his glasses to rub his eyes wearily. Talk. I've known you for 43 years. I know when something is terribly wrong. For the next 20 minutes, I told him everything. The fake special birthday outing, Ethan's cruel words, how he stripped me of my belongings, the lies he told the staff about my supposed dementia and violence. Jake listened with a tense jaw, the veins in his neck standing out with each revelation. When I finished, he was silent for almost a full minute, processing the information. Finally, he spoke, his voice trembling with contained rage. Andrew, this is kidnapping. Forced institutionalization without legitimate medical cause. I can get you out of here right now. I'll call the police. I'll report your son for... No, I interrupted him with surprising firmness. He looked at me, stunned. Not yet, Jake. What do you mean, not yet? They're holding you prisoner. Your son committed a serious crime. I took a deep breath, choosing my words carefully. Listen to me. If we act impulsively now, Ethan will just say it was a misunderstanding, that I consented to the admission and then got confused. He has false documents. He probably bribed some corrupt doctor to sign non-existent diagnoses. You know how the legal system works. It will be my word against his, and he has papers to back him up. Jake leaned forward, lacing his fingers. So, what do you propose? I need to observe more, understand the full magnitude of what he's doing, because I suspect this isn't just spontaneous cruelty. Ethan planned this meticulously, which means there's more. He's probably trying to access my estate, forge documents, sell properties. If I get out now, he'll just adjust his strategy and be more careful. But if I stay here a few more weeks, under your discreet protection, we can gather irrefutable evidence. Jake's face showed an internal conflict between the impulse to help me immediately and the cold logic of my argument. He finally nodded slowly. You're right. It's what an engineer would do. Analyze the entire structure before intervening. But Andrew, I won't leave you in this miserable room for another day. He stood up with determination. Tomorrow morning, I'll move you to the suite on the 3rd floor, the one we reserve for family members of patients visiting for long periods. It has a private bathroom, television, internal phone. Officially, you'll still be a patient, but in reality, you'll be my protected guest. How much of an estate is your son targeting? I leaned back against the cold wall. 3 commercial properties in prime locations, valued together at $800,000. Investments in bonds and stocks for about $300,000. Savings accounts at Bank of America with around $220,000. accumulated over 40 years of work. Total, $1,320,000, more or less. Jake whistled low. A powerful motive to lock up a father. Does he have access to any of that currently? Not directly, but if he manages to have me declared mentally incompetent using those false documents you mentioned, he could request legal guardianship and take control of everything. That's why it's crucial he doesn't know that you and I know each other. As long as he believes I'm completely isolated, vulnerable, and without resources, he'll feel safe to act, and every action he takes will be evidence. Jake walked to the window, looking at the dark courtyard. You mentioned you have important documents. Where are they? I smiled for the first time with genuine cunning. In the double lining of my wallet. Ethan took it, yes, but he was always careless with details. He probably threw it in some desk drawer without checking it thoroughly. If we manage to recover it, we'll find reduced photocopies of the property deeds, access codes to my safety deposit box at the Bank of America Main Street branch, and the direct phone number of Evan Shaw. Evan Shaw, the corporate lawyer? The same, my personal lawyer for 22 years. He has copies of all my legal documents, wills, powers of attorney. Yes, Jake, you can contact him discreetly on my behalf. He can start a silent investigation into Ethan's activities. Evan is meticulous, a former prosecutor. He'll know exactly what to look for. Jake returned to the chair, now with the expression of a military strategist. All right, this is what we'll do. First thing tomorrow, I'll move you to the suite. I'll tell the staff you need special isolation due to nocturnal agitation episodes that require direct supervision. That will justify me visiting you frequently without raising suspicion. I'll provide you with a basic cell phone that only you and I will know about. From there, you can contact Evan. Perfect. But there's something more important, Jake. I need you to document everything about my admission. The absence of a legitimate prior medical evaluation, the statements Ethan made to the staff, any irregularity in the paperwork. If this eventually goes to court, we'll need institutional proof that this was fraud from the beginning. He nodded vigorously. I have full access to the files. I can make copies of everything without anyone noticing. Furthermore, I'll install a small security camera in your new room, officially for medical monitoring. In reality, it will record anything we need. We were silent for a moment, processing the magnitude of what we were planning. Finally, Jake spoke, his voice thick with emotion. Andrew, when we worked together in Austin, building that municipal building in 1982, we were young. You were 30, I was 26. We spent 18 months mixing concrete under the scorching sun, welding beams 4 meters high, sleeping in shared barracks. We shared bottles of cheap wine, stories of our wives, dreams of the future. You taught me that the foundation of any solid structure is integrity. I never forgot that lesson. I felt a lump in my throat. And you taught me that true friendship is tested not in moments of celebration, but in moments of crisis. Jake extended his hand. I gripped it tightly. You'll get out of this, brother. Not just free, but victorious. Your son will learn that he completely underestimated the man he tried to bury alive. I'm not looking for destructive revenge, Jake. I'm looking for educational justice. I want Ethan to understand the consequences of betraying trust, of valuing money over humanity. If there is any possibility of salvation for his soul, it must come through facing the complete truth of what he did. Jake stood up, picking up his clipboard. Then we'll help him find that truth, even if it hurts him. Rest now, Andrew. Tomorrow your real liberation begins, even if Ethan doesn't know it yet. When the door closed behind my friend, I lay back on the bed, feeling something resembling hope for the first time since my kidnapping. I was not alone, I was not helpless, and most importantly, I had time to build a response as solid and unshakable as the bridges I designed for half a century. Ethan thought he had defeated me in a single move, but real chess is played in many moves, with strategic patience, and I had just moved my first important piece. The next morning marked the beginning of my transformation from victim to strategist. Jake kept his word with military efficiency. At 7 a.m, 2 orderlies entered my room with a wheelchair, explaining to the staff on duty that the director had ordered my transfer to Suite 312 for specialized supervision needs. The new room was another world compared to the cell where Ethan locked me up. It was almost 30 square meters, with a large bed, a small brown leather sofa, a wooden desk, a flat-screen TV, and large windows without bars, overlooking a garden with rose bushes. The private bathroom included an adapted shower and a vanity with a full mirror. It was, essentially, a modest but dignified apartment. Jake appeared 20 minutes later, locking the door from the inside. From his medical bag, he extracted a basic Nokia cell phone, a charger, and a small notebook. The phone is registered in the name of the Asylum Foundation, impossible to trace to you. It has a prepaid balance for 200 hours of calls. Use it exclusively for essential contacts. I took the device with hands that trembled slightly with contained emotion. Technological freedom after weeks of absolute isolation. Jake, I have no words to thank you. He waved it off. Brothers don't thank each other, they support each other. Now, let's talk strategy. You need to contact Evan Shaw as soon as possible, but first, we must consider what exact information you need him to investigate. I sat at the desk, opening the notebook to a clean page. My engineer's brain was shifting into structural planning mode. First, I need Evan to check all the bank accounts under my name. If Ethan tried to access them, there will be digital traces. Banks record every login attempt, every information request, every suspicious movement. Jake nodded as I wrote. Second, he must verify the legal status of my 3 properties. If Ethan is trying to sell or mortgage them, he'll need to forge my signature on deeds. That leaves notarial evidence. Third, I want to know if he filed any legal requests for guardianship or legal incapacitation based on those false medical diagnoses. And regarding your wallet? Jake asked. You mentioned documents hidden in the lining. I closed my eyes, visualizing every detail of that brown leather wallet I had used for 15 years. In the secret compartment behind the card section, there are reduced photographs of the property deeds for Main Street, Oak Avenue, and Maple Drive. Also the 6-digit code for my safety deposit box at Bank of America, 739215, and Evan's business card with his direct number handwritten on the back. Jake was writing furiously. Do you think Ethan checked that compartment? My son inherited many things from his mother, but attention to detail was not one of them. Beatrice was organized and meticulous. Ethan was always impatient, acting on impulse. He probably emptied the wallet of visible cards and cash, assuming he had everything. The secret compartment requires pressing 2 side buttons simultaneously while sliding the lining. It's not obvious. Then it's likely those documents still exist. Where do you think he kept your belongings? I reflected, remembering Ethan's personality. Knowing his ego, he probably left them in his office at the company, the one he inherited from Beatrice in the financial district. He likes to keep trophies of his victories nearby. Besides, if he plans to forge documents, he would need to study my signature, which means keeping samples accessible. Jake got up, walking to the window. Evan could hire a private investigator to recover that wallet. Or better yet, if we get evidence that it contains your stolen documents, the police could get a search warrant. Not yet, I repeated firmly. Every premature action will alert Ethan that there's resistance. I need him to feel absolutely secure, invincible, so that he makes bigger and bigger mistakes. Confident criminals are careless criminals. Jake returned to the sofa, studying me with a mix of admiration and concern. Andrew, I understand the logic, but voluntarily staying here while your son thinks he's destroyed you. Are you sure you can emotionally handle it? The question was valid. During these weeks I had cried in the lonely night. I had felt my heart break every time I remembered the little boy who used to hug me, shouting, "Dad!" when I came home from work. But something bigger than my personal pain was at stake. Jake, if I give in now to the impulse to escape and report him, Ethan will receive legal punishment, yes. Maybe a few months in jail, a fine, a criminal record. But his soul will still be rotten. His understanding of what he did will remain superficial. There will be no real transformation, only resentment for being caught. I stood up, feeling absolute conviction. But if I build this correctly, if I document every lie, every betrayal, every act of cruelty, and then present it to him not just as legal evidence, but as a moral mirror, there is a microscopic possibility that something in him will awaken, that he will look at that mirror and finally see the monster he became. And if there is even a 1% chance of saving his humanity, it's worth the additional suffering. Jake had tears in his eyes. You're a better man than I am, brother. I would just want to destroy him. Destruction is easy. Reconstruction is the true challenge of engineering, whether it's of buildings or human souls. We spent the next hour developing a detailed plan. Jake would contact Evan that same afternoon, using a secure phone from his private office. He would explain the complete situation, sending him photographs of my fraudulent file as preliminary proof. Evan would begin an immediate discreet investigation into suspicious financial movements. Furthermore, Jake would install a miniature security camera in my suite, officially for medical monitoring. In reality, it would record our strategic meetings as documentary backup. He would also provide me with internet access via a personal tablet, allowing me to research relevant laws on forced institutionalization, fraudulent guardianship, and elder rights. "One more thing," I said as Jake prepared to leave. "I need you to record conversations with the staff about what Ethan told them during my initial admission. His false statements about my supposed violence and dementia. Testimonies from Rose, Linda, whoever interacted with him. Every documented lie is future ammunition. Consider it done. Rose has already expressed doubts to me about your diagnosis. I'm sure she will testify if necessary." After Jake left, I sat at the desk with the cell phone in my hands. I had Evan's number memorized after 22 years of professional relationship, but I decided to wait until Jake made initial contact. It was important for Evan to receive the full context before hearing my voice, to avoid emotional reactions that could compromise the investigation. Instead, I opened the notebook and began to write a detailed chronology of events. Exact date of my admission: Tuesday the 17th of March 2024. Approximate time: 11:30 inches the morning. Ethan's exact words: "You're worthless now. You are human waste that only contaminates my life with your existence." Every detail, every gesture, every potential piece of evidence. I also wrote reflections on my history with Ethan, the beautiful moments. His first day of school when he was 5, crying, clinging to my leg, until I convinced him he would be brave. His university graduation with honors in business administration, the pride I felt. His wedding to Natalie, dancing the waltz awkwardly, while I laughed. The birth of Sarah, when he called me at midnight, shouting excitedly, "Dad, you're a grandpa!" But also the dark moments I ignored out of blind love. When I caught him at 16 stealing money from Beatrice's wallet. When he brutally fired a housekeeper for accidentally breaking an expensive plate. When he mocked a beggar on the street in front of Sarah, teaching her contempt. The signs were always there. I just refused to see them, blaming stress, outside influences, anything except accepting that my son was developing corrupt values. That night, lying in the comfortable bed with clean sheets, I looked at the ceiling, thinking about Beatrice. If she were alive, would she have prevented this? Or would Ethan have betrayed her too, to inherit faster? The second option terrified me more. My phone vibrated. A message from Jake. Contacted Evan. He's coming tomorrow disguised as a social consultant. Get ready. I smiled in the darkness. The chess pieces were beginning to move. Evan Shaw arrived at the nursing home at exactly 10 in the morning the next day, dressed in a discreet gray suit and carrying a black leather briefcase that identified any corporate consultant. He was 55 years old, with perfectly cut salt and pepper hair and that penetrating gaze of a lawyer who had spent 20 years in the prosecutor's office before establishing his private practice. Jake personally escorted him to my suite, introducing him to the staff as a specialist in geriatric patient rights conducting a quality audit. No one questioned the explanation. When the door closed behind them, Evan dropped all professional pretense and hugged me tightly. "Andrew, my God." When Jake told me on the phone yesterday, I was up all night. I couldn't believe Ethan was capable of something like this. His voice cracked slightly. He took a deep breath, regaining his composure. "Sit down. I have a lot to report to you, and none of it is good." The three of us settled around the desk. Evan opened his briefcase, extracting a thick folder with documents marked with colored tabs. His meticulous organization was legendary among his clients. "Let's start with the bank accounts," he said, opening the blue section. "Your son tried to access your 3 main accounts at Bank of America using powers of attorney that he fabricated himself. He forged your signature on notarized documents, claiming you granted him full legal power over your finances due to progressive cognitive decline. Luckily, your branch manager, Vincent Ortega, has known you personally for 18 years. He found the signatures suspicious and temporarily blocked access. Requesting additional verification, I felt relief mixed with horror. Vincent saved me without knowing it. Does Ethan know he was blocked? Yes. According to Vincent, your son made a furious scene at the branch 10 days ago, shouting that it was a family emergency, that he needed the funds for your urgent medical treatment. Vincent held firm, explaining that bank protocol requires personal confirmation from the account holder in cases of such significant changes. Ethan threatened to sue him. Jake intervened, his voice laced with contempt. So he's been actively trying to steal for more than 2 weeks. It wasn't a momentary impulse. It's a planned campaign. Evan moved to the yellow section. Now, the properties. Your 2020 model Mercedes-Benz was sold 3 weeks ago to a used car dealership in a suburb for $15,000. $400. Ethan used a copy of the vehicle's documentation that he apparently had access to, signed as your proxy, and received payment in cash. The dealership didn't verify properly because the transaction looked legitimate on the surface. My car, I murmured. I bought that Mercedes to celebrate my 70th birthday. A gift to myself after decades of austerity. Is it recoverable? Difficult. It's already been resold to a third-party buyer. We could litigate, but it would take years. Better to use it as criminal evidence of misappropriation. Evan continued, his face growing grimmer. But here is the truly alarming part. Your commercial property on Main Street is in the process of being sold. Ethan found a buyer willing to pay $400,000. He already signed a purchase agreement, again using forged documents. The final closing is scheduled for 6 weeks from now, before a notary. If that goes through, you'll lose a property valued at almost $500,000. The air left my lungs. How do we stop that? By filing a formal complaint with the Notary Association. I've already drafted the document. I just need your signature authorizing me. The notary is obligated to verify the seller's personal identity before closing. When he discovers the fraud, not only will the sale be canceled, but there will be documentary evidence of the attempt. I took the pen Evan extended to me, signing with a trembling but determined hand. What else? Evan exchanged a significant look with Jake before opening the red section. Andrew, your daughter-in-law, Natalie, visited this nursing home exactly 2 weeks ago. She spoke with Dr. Ramirez, the general practitioner here. Jake nodded, gravely. I reviewed the notes from that conversation yesterday. Natalie tried to convince Dr. Ramirez to increase your psychiatric medication, specifically strong antipsychotics that would induce genuine confusion and cognitive decline. She claimed you were dangerous, that you had threatened violence. They wanted to actually turn me into what they claimed I already was, I whispered, feeling nauseous. Dope me until the lie became reality? Exactly. Fortunately, Dr. Ramirez is an ethical professional. He refused the request, explaining that he only prescribes medication based on direct medical evaluation, not family requests. But here's the worst part. Jake took a small recorder from his pocket. I have the facility's common areas monitored for security. Natalie didn't know there was a microphone in the waiting room. Listen to this. He pressed play. Natalie's voice emerged, crystal clear and unmistakable. Doctor, understand the situation. My father-in-law is obstructing our financial plans. As long as he's lucid, he can block transactions we need to complete. If you could just help him be calmer, more confused. We would make a generous donation of $5,000 to this home. No one needs to know the details. Dr. Ramirez's voice responded coldly. Ma'am, what you are suggesting is bribery to commit medical malpractice. I must ask you to leave my office immediately. The sound of hurried footsteps, a door slamming violently. Jake turned off the recording. Documented bribery attempt, Evan said with dark satisfaction. This is a serious felony. Natalie could face up to 4 years in prison. I remained silent, processing the depth of the conspiracy. It wasn't just Ethan acting impulsively. It was a coordinated operation with Natalie to chemically incapacitate me, illegally, while systematically stealing everything I worked for over half a century. Is there more? I asked, though part of me feared the answer. Evan nodded heavily. Ethan filed a preliminary judicial request to have you declared legally incompetent. He used the false medical diagnoses he obtained. God knows how, probably by bribing some unscrupulous doctor. The hearing is scheduled for 2 months from now. If the judge approves the incapacitation without you present to defend yourself, Ethan would obtain full legal guardianship, total control over your person and your estate. Then we have 2 months to build a complete counterattack, I said, feeling my determination crystallize. Evan, I need you to document absolutely everything. Every bank fraud attempt, every forgery, every bribe. We will build a criminal case so solid it's irrefutable. I'm already on it. But Andrew, Evan looked at me directly. Why not get out now? We have enough evidence to arrest Ethan and Natalie today. Why wait? I got up, walking to the window overlooking the garden. An old man was walking slowly among the rose bushes, pushed in a wheelchair by a young nurse. I thought of all the elderly parents betrayed by greedy children, reduced to objects, to monetary obstacles. Because I want Ethan to go all the way, I replied without turning. I want him to execute his plan completely, to believe he has won, to savor that false victory. Only then, when he is most confident and vulnerable, will we show him the full mirror of his monstrosity. The fall from a greater height generates a greater impact, and only an absolute impact has a microscopic chance of genuine transformation. Evan closed his folder slowly. You're playing chess while your son is playing checkers. He has no idea the opponent he's facing. My son taught me something without meaning to, I said, turning to them. He taught me that paternal love has limits, that a moment comes when you must choose between protecting your child from consequences or protecting them with consequences. I have spent 72 years choosing the first option. It's time to choose the second. Jake approached, placing a hand on my shoulder. And if this doesn't change him, Andrew, if it's too late for his redemption, then at least you'll stop him from destroying others. Sarah, future partners, employees, anyone who crosses his path. Sometimes saving a soul means first breaking it completely, to rebuild it from a solid foundation. The three of us fell silent, united by a common purpose. Evan finally spoke. I'll continue investigating. Every week I'll bring you updates disguised as audits. We will document everything down to the last detail. After they both left, I sat down to write a long letter to Sarah. She deserved to know the truth. Eventually, but not yet. First I had to complete this architecture of educational justice, brick by brick, proof by proof. My phone vibrated. A message from Jake. Rose reports that Ethan hasn't called even once to ask how you are. 4 weeks of absolute silence. 4 weeks since he abandoned me here to die. Forgotten. I smiled bitterly. Perfect. Every day of abandonment was another line in the file on his cruelty. On the exact day I completed 3 months locked in the pines, a rainy Thursday in mid-June, I heard desperate knocking on the door of my suite. It was 4 in the afternoon. Jake had gone to an administrative meeting at City Hall. I was reading legal reports Evan had left me that morning when the knocking became more insistent. Grandpa! Grandpa! I know you're in there. Please, open up. My heart stopped. Sarah. It was Sarah's voice, loaded with anguish and determination. I got up so fast I momentarily felt dizzy, running to the door. I pulled it open. There was my granddaughter, soaked by the rain, dark hair stuck to her face, eyes red from crying. She was carrying a university backpack on one shoulder, and in her hand she held a cell phone showing a screen with the asylum's address. We looked at each other for an eternal second before she threw herself into my arms, sobbing against my chest. Grandpa, I found you. I finally found you. I hugged her with a strength I didn't know I still possessed, feeling 3 months of concentrated pain flowing through that contact. Sarah, my girl, how? She pulled away slightly, wiping tears with the back of her hand. Come in, we have a lot to. Does anyone else know I came? Just the reception staff, I guess. Come in, quick. I closed the door, guiding her to the sofa. She dropped her backpack, looking around the suite with a mixture of relief and confusion. This place is... I didn't expect this. Dad said you were in a specialized clinic in Switzerland for experimental Alzheimer's treatment. Your father lies extraordinarily well when it suits him. I replied with a bitterness I couldn't hide. Sit down, Sarah. I need to tell you the whole truth before he finds out you found me. For the next half hour, I told her everything. The fake birthday outing, the cruel words, the stripping of my belongings, the forced isolation. She listened, her expression transforming from shock to horror to contained fury. When I mentioned Natalie's attempt to drug me through medical bribery, Sarah stood up abruptly. I knew something was wrong. Grandpa, 2 months ago I started noticing strange things. Dad would come home with bags from expensive stores. Mom had new jewelry every week. They bought a new Audi, a 6 for $62,000, paid in cash. When I asked where so much money was coming from, Dad said the company was booming. She sat down again, pulling a small notebook from her backpack. But I study psychology, Grandpa. I know how to recognize behavioral patterns, so I started documenting. She opened the notebook, showing me pages filled with cramped handwriting. I recorded every big purchase, every trip, every strange expense. I took the notebook, reading with growing astonishment. Sarah had documented meticulously. April 3rd, trip to Dubai. 5 days, luxury hotel. Estimated $8,000. April 16th, Mom buys a diamond necklace. $18,000 according to a phone conversation I overheard. April 29th, Dad buys a Rolex Submariner. $13,000. The list went on, page after page. At the end, Sarah had calculated the total, $123,000 in 4 months. Sarah, this is pure gold as evidence. How did you know to look for me here specifically? She smiled sadly. 3 weeks ago I tried to call you. Your number was disconnected. I went to your apartment. Empty, mail piling up. I confronted Dad. He repeated the Switzerland story. But something in his eyes. He was lying. I knew it with absolute certainty. She leaned forward, intensity burning in her gaze. I started investigating on my own. I went through his office one night when he went out. I found documents, papers with your signature that looked weird, different, and I found payment receipts to this residence. 3 months prepaid for $3,600 total. And then nothing, as if they had just abandoned you here, waiting for you to simply disappear. My throat tightened with emotion. You risked a lot, snooping like that. If your father had caught you— I don't give a damn what Dad thinks, she said with uncharacteristic vehemence. You're my grandfather. The only one who taught me real values, who listened to me when everyone ignored me, who paid for my university when Dad said it was an unnecessary expense because women just get married anyway. I owe you everything. Tears were rolling freely down my face now. Sarah, you have to listen to me carefully. What I'm about to ask you is difficult, maybe impossible. But it's crucial. She nodded seriously. Anything, Grandpa. I need you to go back home and act as if nothing happened. You cannot reveal that you found me. You cannot confront your father. I need you to be my eyes and ears on the outside, documenting your parents' every move, while I build a solid legal case against them. I saw the conflict in her expression. You want me to pretend everything is normal while I know they have you prisoner here? I'm not a prisoner anymore, I explained. The director of this home, Jacob Miller, is my best friend of 43 years. He's protecting me, helping me gather evidence. I have a lawyer working on the case, but we need more time, more proof. If we act prematurely now, your father might escape the full consequences. Sarah processed the information, biting her lower lip as she had since she was a child when she was thinking deeply. So, this is a trap. You're letting Dad think he won while you prepare a counterattack. Exactly. But, Sarah, you must understand something. This will end with your father facing serious criminal charges. Prison, probably. Your mother, too. Can you live with that? She looked at me without flinching. Grandpa, a month ago, I heard Mom say on the phone, the old man should just die quickly and save us the trouble. She was talking about you. My own father calls you human waste when he thinks no one is listening. They're not my parents anymore. They are greedy strangers using your money to live out luxury fantasies while you rot here. So yes, I can live perfectly fine with watching them pay. I hugged her again. You are stronger and braver than I was at your age. But this will be painful. Seeing them daily, faking family love while you know the truth. I've already been living it for weeks, she replied. At least now I'll have a purpose. What specifically do you need me to document? We spent the next hour strategizing. Sarah would continue her detailed expense journal. She would try to photograph documents if she got access to Ethan's office again. She would record conversations when possible using a recording app on her phone. She would report any strange meetings, suspicious calls, unusual behavior. Also, I added, keep in touch with my close friends. Philip Reed, Marcus Torres, people who have known me for decades. Ask them to write testimonial statements about my historical mental state, confirming I never showed signs of dementia or violence. Those testimonies will destroy your father's false diagnoses. Sarah was writing furiously in a new notebook I provided. How often do we communicate? Use this number. I wrote my secret phone number on a piece of paper. Memorize it, then destroy the paper. Call me only from private places, never from your house where they might hear you. The university library, public restrooms, parks. Vary the locations. She memorized the number, repeating the digits until she mastered them, then tore the paper into tiny pieces and flushed them down the toilet. When she returned, her expression was that of a soldier accepting a dangerous mission. One last thing, Grandpa. What happens to me at the end of this? When Dad and Mom are arrested, where do I end up? I took her hands in mine. Sarah, you are innocent. You are a victim of their lies too. Whatever happens, I will protect you. I have resources, properties, investments that your father couldn't touch. Your education is secured. Your future is secured. You will never be alone. She cried silently, squeezing my hands. Thank you, Grandpa, for everything, for not giving up. We Carters don't give up, I replied with a small smile. Your grandmother Beatrice taught me that, and now you remind me of it. Sarah stayed for another half hour before the rain subsided. When she finally prepared to leave, she hugged me one last time. I'll get you out of here soon, Grandpa, I promise. You already did, my girl. You gave me back hope and purpose. That's worth more than physical freedom. I watched her walk away down the hall, backpack on her shoulder, head held high. In her, I saw the future, redemption, proof that not all was lost. If my bloodline produced a monster like Ethan, it also produced an angel like Sarah. That night, lying in the dark, I reflected on the strange balance of the universe. I lost a son, but I gained a warrior granddaughter. And maybe, just maybe, at the end of this painful road, I would get some part of that son back too. Or, at least, save his soul from total damnation. The last week of June marked the definitive turning point in my strategy. 3 months exactly since my forced admission, and every piece of the puzzle finally fit together with the precision of a Swiss watch. Evan arrived that Monday at noon with a briefcase, noticeably heavier than on previous visits, his face displaying a mix of professional satisfaction and moral disgust. "Andrew, we have everything," he announced, dropping the briefcase on my desk with a heavy thud. "Absolutely everything needed to legally bury your son and Natalie. The question is no longer if we can win, but how long you want them to suffer before we act." Jake entered moments later, locking the door. We had synchronized these meetings like a military operation. The three of us sat down as Evan unfolded folders organized with numbered tabs from 1 to 15. "Let's start with the most recent bombshell," he said, opening folder number 1, confirmed via private investigator. Ethan stopped paying the nursing home after exactly the initial 3 prepaid months. $3,600 was the total he paid out. After that, absolute silence. He expected the administration to simply transfer you to an overcrowded public facility or, even worse, leave you on the street when they couldn't contact him. Jake intervened, his voice thick with disgust. "Indeed. We received 3 administrative calls trying to contact Ethan about payment renewal. All went straight to voicemail. He intentionally avoided responding, assuming we would just get rid of the problem automatically. Premeditated abandonment," I commented coldly. "Add it to the file." Evan nodded, making a note on his tablet. Folder 2, audio recording of Natalie attempting to bribe Dr. Ramirez with $5,000 to psychiatrically medicate you. I have an official certified transcript. Medical bribery. Penalty, up to 4 years in prison. He continued methodically. Folder 3. Forensic analysis of bank documents proves the signatures on the powers of attorney submitted by Ethan were forged. I hired 3 independent handwriting experts. All 3 agree. Crude imitations of your authentic signature. Here are the technical reports with digital overlays showing discrepancies in stroke pressure, angles, proportions. Sarah had sent me a photograph of one of those false documents. Seeing it now, under professional analysis, was unsettling. My son had practiced my signature dozens of times to create a convincing version for an untrained eye, but modern technology revealed every microscopic irregularity. Folder 4, Evan proceeded. Fraudulent sale of your Mercedes-Benz. I have a sworn statement from the dealership confirming Ethan presented himself as your legal proxy. He used documentation that appeared legitimate. He received $15,400 in cash, which he never declared on his taxes. Tax evasion added to misappropriation. Jake whistled low. "How many crimes are we up to?" 7 different ones so far, Evan replied without looking up from his notes. Folder 5. Attempted sale of the Main Street property. I contacted the notary designated for the closing. He confirmed an appointment scheduled for July 23rd, exactly 3 weeks from today. Ethan already signed the purchase agreement using forged documents again. The notary accepted my formal complaint, blocked the transaction, and initiated an internal investigation. "Does the buyer know what's happening?" I asked. "Yes. A man named William Syons, a legitimate businessman who thought he was making an honest deal. He's furious with Ethan, threatening to sue for damages for wasting his time and resources on due diligence. He could be a valuable witness at trial." Evan opened folder 6 with a particularly grim expression. "This is perhaps the most disturbing. Sarah provided me with her journal documenting the extravagant spending of your stolen funds. I hired a forensic accountant to trace the exact origin of the money. Results: Ethan sold your Mercedes for $15,400 cash. He withdrew $48,000 from a joint savings account you had with Beatrice, an account he inherited when she died but legally was not supposed to touch until your passing, according to the will's clauses." I felt a stab in my chest. That account was for Sarah. Beatrice and I established it specifically for our granddaughter's university education. I know. I read Beatrice's will. Clause 17, paragraph 3. Funds are to remain untouched until the passing of my husband Andrew, at which time they will be transferred in full to our granddaughter Sarah Carter for her higher education. Ethan violated his own mother's testamentary will. Jake stood up, walking to the window with his hands in his pockets. How can someone fall so low, not only betraying his father but also desecrating the memory of his mother? Greed dissolves bonds that love built, I said quietly. Continue, Evan. Folder 7. Testimonial statements that Sarah collected following your instructions. Philip Reed, your bridge partner of 25 years, confirms you play complex games, memorizing every card played. Marcus Torres, your gym partner, testifies you completed the Chicago Marathon at 70. Dr. Alice Mendoza, your primary care physician of 18 years, provides a complete medical history showing 0 signs of cognitive decline in annual exams as of last February, 1 month before your admission. Medical evidence completely contradicts the fraudulent diagnoses Ethan presented, Jake summarized. Exactly. Folder 8. Complete financial trace of Ethan and Natalie's expenses for the last 4 months. Trips to Dubai and Paris, $12,000. Audi. A $62,000 paid in cash. Various jewelry, $23,000. Designer clothes, $8,000. Luxury restaurants, $7,000. Electronics, $4,000. Total documented by Sarah, $123,000 exactly. Evan looked at me directly. Andrew, your son spent almost as much in 4 months of frivolity as you earned in 3 years as a civil engineer. Stolen money, while he had you locked up, believing you were forgotten. I took a deep breath, controlling the rage that threatened to overflow. What else? Folder 9. Judicial request for legal incapacitation, filed by Ethan 6 weeks ago, based on medical reports I investigated personally. The supposed doctor who signed the advanced Alzheimer's diagnosis turns out to be Ramon Vega Molina, a retired doctor who lost his license 3 years ago for gross negligence. He is currently barred from practicing medicine. However, he apparently sells signatures for cash. How much did Ethan pay him? Jake asked. According to bank records I obtained via a preliminary court order, $2,500 transferred to Vega Molina's account on March 8th, 9 days before your admission. Payment for a false diagnosis, documented electronically. The folders continued. 10. Forensic psychological analysis requested by Evan, evaluating my current mental capacity through interviews we conducted here. Conclusion. Cognitive function superior to 90% of men my age. Sure. Testimonies from the nursing home staff, Rose and Linda mainly, confirming my consistent lucid behavior for 3 months. 12. Complete asset investigation revealing my 3 commercial properties, investments, bank accounts. Verified total, $1,317,000. 13. Current will naming Ethan as the primary heir, a document that obviously needs urgent modification. 14. Photographic timeline Sarah compiled, showing Ethan's modest lifestyle until March versus the explosion of luxury since April. 15. Audio recordings Sarah secretly captured, where Natalie says, quote, "When the old man finally dies, we'll sell everything and move to Florida. Imagine the life we'll have with over $1 million free and clear." 16. When Evan finished, silence filled the room like a dense fog. 17. 3 additional folders contained legal drafts, a complete criminal complaint, a restraining order request, and a new will completely excluding Ethan. 18. Andrew, Evan said finally, you have in your hands the ability to completely destroy your son. A criminal prosecution would result in a minimum of 5 years in prison, adding up all the crimes. He will lose his company, reputation, family, everything. Are you absolutely sure you want to proceed? I closed my eyes, visualizing the little boy Ethan once was. 5 years old, crying after falling off his bike, me bandaging his scraped knees while promising, "Dad will always protect you." But that boy died long ago, replaced by a man who called me human waste. "Proceed with everything," I replied, opening my eyes. But with one modification. They both looked at me, quizzically. I want to include a path to redemption in the will. If Ethan demonstrates genuine change through 500 hours of community service in nursing homes over 5 consecutive years, documented weekly psychological therapy, and full restitution of the stolen money. He can receive a small monthly pension of $1,200. Not the full inheritance, but a dignified survival. Sarah will inherit 80% with the condition of helping him if he meets the requirements. Evan blinked, surprised. After everything he did to you, you're still giving him an out. It's not an out. It's a final chance to save his soul. He will probably refuse it. He will probably fail. But I need to know that I tried, until the absolute end. Jake smiled sadly. You're a better man than your son deserves. Perhaps. Or perhaps I'm just a father who can't completely give up hope. The first day of July dawned with a clear sky and a pleasant 22-degree temperature, a perfect day for freedom. At 9 inches the morning, a court officer knocked on the door of my suite, handing me a sealed envelope with the court's insignia. Jake was present as a witness. Mr. Andrew Carter, the officer read formally. You are hereby notified that an order for your immediate release has been issued following a review of your case. You are free from this institution, effective immediately. Furthermore, a protective order has been issued against Ethan Carter and Natalie Carter, prohibiting them from direct or indirect contact with you under penalty of arrest. I signed the acknowledgement of receipt with a surprisingly steady hand. 3 months of planning were culminating, but this was just the beginning of Phase 2. Confrontation and consequences. Evan had coordinated everything meticulously. I would not return to any of my known addresses. Instead, I moved to an apartment I bought 15 years ago in a discreet neighborhood, a property Ethan never knew existed. A fourth property kept in absolute secrecy, a refuge I had planned precisely for unpredictable emergencies like this one. The apartment was on the 5th floor of an old, restored building. 60 square meters, 2 bedrooms, a small balcony overlooking a tree-lined square. Modest, but comfortable. Jake accompanied me personally, helping me set up basic furniture that Evan had bought days earlier. Are you sure you don't want to stay at my house? Jake offered as we arranged clothes in a closet. I have a guest room that's permanently empty. I need independence, I explained. This place represents a new beginning. Besides, strategically, it's better that Ethan can't trace me through known associations. As we were organizing, my cell phone rang. Sarah, Grandpa. Dad just received a large envelope by certified mail. He's pale, reading the documents. I hear him mentioning criminal complaint, forgery, court order. I think your counterattack has arrived. That's right, my girl. Stay alert, but stay safe. Don't intervene, no matter what. Observe and report. 5 minutes later, Evan called. The 4 criminal complaints were delivered simultaneously. One to Ethan at his office, another to Natalie at the gym where she does Pilates, a third to the notary who was going to close the fraudulent sale, and a fourth to Bank of America. A preventive freeze on all your accounts against unauthorized access has also been executed. Ethan will discover he is completely cut off from your estate. I hung up and looked at Jake. Now comes the interesting part. Ethan will try to contact me desperately. I didn't have to wait long. At 11 in the morning, Rose called me from the Pines. Mr. Carter, a man claiming to be your son, arrived 10 minutes ago, demanding to see you. He's yelling at the reception, threatening to sue the home. We explained that you were legally released this morning, but he doesn't accept the answer. Should we call security? Yes, Rose, and document everything. If he becomes violent, call the police. Half an hour later, Sarah reported. Grandpa, Dad came home like a hurricane. He broke a lamp, throwing it against the wall. He's yelling that someone betrayed him, that this is a conspiracy. Mom is crying, saying they need a lawyer urgently. Dad tried to call you at your old number, but obviously, it's disconnected. Now he's calling all your known friends. No one is answering. I smiled with grim satisfaction. Philip, Marcus, and the others had been instructed to completely ignore any contact from Ethan. The noose was tightening. At 2 in the afternoon, Natalie appeared at Evan's office without an appointment. He called me from the restroom while she waited in the reception. Andrew, your daughter-in-law is here, hysterical. She says she wants to negotiate, that it was all a terrible misunderstanding. Should I see her? Record her if she agrees to talk, but make it clear there is no negotiation possible. The criminal charges are filed. Only the DA's office can withdraw them now, and they won't with such overwhelming evidence. Evan saw her briefly. As he told me later, Natalie alternated between tearful pleas and veiled threats. Andrew is senile, confused. We were just trying to protect him. This is elder abuse, manipulated by you. Evan simply handed her a copy of the audio recordings where she tried to bribe Dr. Ramirez and talked about waiting for the old man to die. Natalie staggered out of the office. The real blow came at 4 p.m. The prosecutor assigned to the case, a woman named Beatrice Romero with a reputation for being relentless, summoned Ethan and Natalie for a mandatory deposition on July 9th. Evan had presented such an exhaustive file that the prosecutor decided to proceed immediately without further investigation. Sarah sent me a photograph of the summons that Ethan left on the dining room table. On it, a list of preliminary charges: illegal forced institutionalization, forgery of public documents, attempted bank fraud, misappropriation, bribery of a medical official, violation of a testamentary will, tax evasion. 7 serious felonies that, combined, could result in 8 to 10 years in prison. That night, settled in my new apartment, I made chamomile tea while reviewing the documents Evan left. The new will was ready for my signature, completely drafted. Sarah would inherit $800,000 in properties and investments. $200,000 would go to a charitable foundation for nursing homes. $150,000 to Jake in gratitude for his help. The rest would cover legal fees and an emergency reserve. Ethan received exactly $0 of direct inheritance, but, as I promised, there was the redemption clause. If he completed 60 monthly hours of community service in nursing homes for 5 consecutive years, attended weekly psychological therapy with verified quarterly reports, and restituted every stolen dollar through monthly payments, he could receive a survival pension of $1,200 a month, managed by a trust that Sarah would control. It was a generous offer, considering his crimes. He would probably reject it out of pride, but my conscience would be clear, knowing I extended a final hand. Paula came to visit me around 8, using public transport to avoid being followed. She brought homemade food she had prepared, a Spanish omelet, salad, freshly baked bread. We ate in silence initially, both processing the magnitude of what had been unleashed. "How are your parents?" I finally asked. She pushed food around on her plate. "Destroyed? Dad hasn't left his home office in hours. I hear him making frantic calls, probably looking for a lawyer willing to defend him. Mom packed a large suitcase. I think she's planning to go to her sister's in Barcelona. She's talking about divorce, about saving herself." "Rats fleeing a sinking ship," I commented without emotion. Sarah looked at me with bright eyes. "Grandpa, I know you did the right thing, but it still hurts. They're my parents, with all their horrible flaws. Part of me still remembers when Dad used to take me to the park, when Mom brushed my hair for school parties. Does that just disappear?" I took her hand across the table. "It doesn't disappear, Sarah. Those memories are real, part of who they were before greed corrupted them. But people change, not always for the better. Your pain is valid. Grieving for the parents they were doesn't mean you're betraying me or justice." She nodded, tears rolling. "Do you cry for Dad?" "Every night," I admitted. "I cry for the boy he was, for the man he could have been, for the relationship we lost. But that doesn't change what I have to do. Sometimes, the deepest love requires the hardest decisions." We stayed up until midnight, talking about the future. Sarah was considering a specialization in gerontology after this experience, working to protect vulnerable elders from family abuse. Her passion was inspiring. When she left, I stood on the balcony, watching the silent square. Lampposts illuminated empty benches where, during the day, old men fed pigeons. I thought of all the elderly parents suffering similar betrayals in silence, without the resources or knowledge to defend themselves. My phone vibrated. A message from an unknown number. "Dad, it's Ethan. Please, we have to talk. This is a terrible misunderstanding. I love you. Call me." I blocked the number without replying. Then another message from a different number. "Andrew, it's Natalie." Ethan was confused. "I was trying to help you. Please, drop the charges. Think of Sarah." I blocked that one too. Evan had warned me they would attempt desperate emotional manipulation. I wouldn't fall for it. A third notification. An email from a lawyer representing Ethan requesting an urgent meeting to resolve the matter out of court before a public scandal. I forwarded the email to Evan with a simple note. "You answer." My answer is no. I finally went to bed past 1 in the morning, sleeping for the first time in months without nightmares of abandonment, because now, the one who was abandoned wasn't me. It was my son, facing the consequences he built with his own cruel hands. On September 9th, 2 months after my release, The day of the preliminary court hearing arrived. Courtroom 3 of the Chicago Criminal Court, an imposing gray stone building in City Square. Evan picked me up at 8 a.m., reviewing the final strategy together during the taxi ride. Remember, Andrew, stay calm no matter what Ethan or his lawyer say. Judge Martinez is known for valuing composure and coherence. We've prepared this meticulously, but your personal impression will be crucial. We arrived 30 minutes early. The room was still empty, rows of varnished wooden benches, a raised dais where the judge would preside, the national and state flags flanking the judicial seal. We took seats in the front row on the left side. Jake arrived 10 minutes later, dressed in a formal dark suit. Sarah entered alone, avoiding looking at me directly so as not to show obvious favoritism before testifying. At 9 o'clock sharp, the back doors opened. Ethan entered with his lawyer, a burly man in his 60 seconds named Richard Camps, known for defending lost causes with aggressive tactics. My son looked haggard, 20 years older than his 45. Wrinkled suit, deep dark circles, hands trembling slightly. Our gazes met for an endless second. I saw in his eyes a mixture of terror, rage, and something resembling a plea. I looked away. Natalie did not appear. Her lawyer, a young woman named Patricia Sands, submitted a medical certificate claiming an acute nervous breakdown that prevented her attendance. The judge frowned but accepted the temporary absence. Preliminary hearing in criminal case number 2024 to 3512. The People versus Ethan Carter and Natalie Carter. Charges: illegal forced institutionalization, forgery, fraud, misappropriation, bribery, and others. All rise. Judge Mercedes Martinez entered, a woman in her late 50s with silver hair pulled back, reading glasses hanging from a gold chain. Her reputation was fair but inflexible. She sat, adjusting the microphone. The prosecution may proceed with the presentation of preliminary evidence. Prosecutor Romero stood up, a woman of 40 with an imposing presence. For the next hour, she presented the case systematically. She projected a complete timeline on a large screen. March 17th, forced admission. Testimonies from Rose and Linda. Nurses testifying that Ethan described non-existent violence and dementia. Forensic analysis of forged signatures. The audio recording of Natalie trying to bribe Dr. Ramirez, played in the room at high volume. When Natalie's voice filled the room, saying $5,000 to medicate him stronger, I need him to be confused. I saw Ethan sink into his chair. Several spectators in the public gallery murmured indignantly. Jake testified first. I have known Andrew Carter for 43 years. We built the Austin Municipal Building together in 1982. He is a man with a photographic memory, a brilliant analytical mind. When I discovered he was admitted to my nursing home under a false diagnosis of dementia, I was horrified. For 3 months, I observed his daily behavior. He never showed a single sign of cognitive decline. He played chess with me. We discussed international politics. He solved advanced crosswords. His admission was a complete fraud. Lawyer Camps tried to cross-examine. Isn't it convenient, Mr. Miller, that you, being a friend of the alleged victim, provided him with a privileged room and helped him fabricate this accusation against a loving family? Jake looked at him with cutting coldness. What would have been convenient, counsel, was to immediately report the fraud to the authorities. I didn't do so because Andrew convinced me to methodically document every aspect of his son's criminal conspiracy, and thanks to that strategic patience, we have irrefutable evidence. Rose and Linda testified next, corroborating everything. Rose added a devastating detail. Ethan Carter did not call a single time in 3 months to ask about his father. Not once. He stopped paying after the initial period, as if he had thrown away trash, expecting someone else to pick it up. I've worked with the elderly for 12 years. I've seen negligence, but never abandonment this calculated. Evan presented the bank files showing the fraudulent access attempts. Vincent Ortega, the Bank of America manager, testified about the forged powers of attorney and Ethan's erratic behavior when they were blocked. It was Sarah's turn. My granddaughter walked to the stand with a dignity that filled me with pride. She swore to tell the truth, placing her hand on the Constitution, her voice firm. Prosecutor Romero guided her gently. Sarah, explain to the court your relationship with the defendant. Ethan Carter is my biological father. Mr. Andrew Carter is my paternal grandfather. And what did you observe in the months following your grandfather's admission? Sarah opened her journal, reading with a voice thick with controlled emotion. My parents were suddenly living like millionaires. International trips, luxury cars, expensive jewelry. When I asked where the money was coming from, Dad said the company was booming, but I checked the company's financial statements that he left in his office. The company was losing money, not making it. So I began to document systematically. She presented photographs, receipts, notes, the verified total, $123,000 in 4 months. This money didn't come from honest work. It came from stealing from my grandfather while he was locked up, believing he was abandoned to die. Camps tried to attack. Miss Carter, isn't it true that your grandfather promised you a substantial inheritance if you testified against your father? Sarah looked at him directly. My grandfather offered me unconditional support because he always has. I am testifying against my father not for money, but because I witnessed his crimes and I cannot live with that silent complicity. I am a psychology student. I understand manipulation, abuse of power, and financial violence against the vulnerable. My father committed all of those acts. Finally, they called me to the stand. I walked slowly, aware of every gaze. I swore to tell the truth, sitting in front of Judge Martinez. Prosecutor Romero asked, Mr. Carter, describe in your own words the events of the 17th of March 2024. I took a deep breath. For the next half hour, I recounted everything chronologically. The promise of the special outing, the drive to the Pines, the brutal revelation, Ethan's exact words. You're worthless now. You are human waste that contaminates my life. The stripping of my belongings, the confinement, the complete isolation. At any time, did you request or consent to this admission? The prosecutor asked. Never. It was a premeditated kidnapping. My son planned every detail to get rid of me while he stole my estate. Camps tried to discredit. Mr. Carter, isn't it true that you were suffering from episodes of confusion, that you were forgetting important things? Counselor. I am 72 years old. I occasionally forget where I left my keys. That does not constitute dementia. I can recite from memory my 50 most important engineering projects. Exact dates, budgets, technical specifications. Would you like me to demonstrate? Judge Martinez almost smiled. That will not be necessary, Mr. Carter. I presented the medical opinions of 3 independent doctors, all confirming my full mental capacity. Dr. Alice Mendoza, my doctor of 18 years, testified that my last cognitive exams, in February, showed excellent function. When Ethan was finally called to testify, his lawyer tried to have him remain silent, invoking his right not to self-incriminate. The judge allowed the silence but ordered, the defendant may choose not to testify, but the court notes his silence and will consider it when evaluating the evidence presented. Ethan stood up briefly, looked toward where I was, and for the first time in months, I saw tears rolling down his cheeks. He opened his mouth as if wanting to speak, but Camps pulled him by the arm, seating him again. Judge Martinez reviewed her notes extensively. Finally, she spoke. The evidence presented by the prosecution is overwhelming and consistent. Multiple testimonies, forensic documentation, audio recordings, expert analysis. Everything points to a systematic criminal conspiracy to fraudulently incapacitate Mr. Andrew Carter and appropriate his estate. Given the weight of the evidence, the court orders the continuation of the criminal process. Mr. Ethan Carter will remain on conditional release with a prohibition on leaving the country, an obligation to report weekly to the authorities, and an absolute restraining order of 500 meters from his father. The trial hearing is set for November 3rd. Court is adjourned. The gavel's strike echoed in the silent room. I left the courthouse surrounded by Evan and Jake. Sarah hugged me on the steps. You did it, Grandpa. We did it, I corrected, kissing her forehead. Ethan came out minutes later, surrounded by photographers. Someone had leaked the case to the press. Headlines on reporters' phones already read. Elderly engineer accuses son of forced institutionalization and theft. My son searched for me with his gaze through the crowd. Our eyes met one last time, before his lawyer pushed him toward a waiting car. In that gaze, I saw something I didn't expect. Not rage, but the absolute devastation of a man confronting, for the first time, the monster he had become. 3 days after the preliminary hearing, I sat across from the public notary Fernando Alcazar in his office on Genoa Street, a traditional office with mahogany shelves full of legal codes, an antique desk polished to a shine, the official state seal hanging on the wall. Evan accompanied me as a witness, along with Jake, who had insisted on witnessing this historic moment. Mr. Carter, the notary began, adjusting his glasses, I have thoroughly reviewed the will you wish to formalize. I must confirm that you are completely certain of these provisions. They are unusual, to say the least. Completely certain, I replied with a firmness that surprised even me. This will represents not only the distribution of my estate, but a final attempt at a moral lesson. The notary nodded, beginning the formal reading. Public Will and Testament of Andrew Carter. In full possession of my mental faculties, as demonstrated by the attached medical reports, I dispose of my estate, valued at approximately $1,317,000, as follows. First, I expressly revoke any previous will, codicil, or testamentary disposition. This document completely nullifies the prior will from the 15th of January 2018, which named my son, Ethan Carter, as the principal heir. I felt the weight of those words. I had drafted that previous will thinking of family continuity, assuming Ethan would protect the legacy I built. How naive I was, the notary continued. Second, I name my granddaughter Sarah Carter as my principal heir, granting her 80% of my total estate, equivalent to approximately $1,053,000. This bequest includes the property on Main Street, the property on Oak Avenue, investments at Bank of America, and designated savings accounts. Sarah, who had come straight from the university, was sobbing silently. I squeezed her hand. Third, I donate $200,000 to the Vulnerable Elder Protection Foundation, an organization dedicated to preventing abuse against seniors. This donation is to be used specifically to create a free legal aid program for elders facing family mistreatment. It was a cause that had acquired deep meaning after my experience. If my story saved even one elderly person from suffering a similar betrayal, it was worth every moment of pain. Fourth, I donate $150,000 to Jacob Miller in recognition of his unwavering friendship of 43 years and his invaluable help during my moment of greatest vulnerability. Jake protested immediately. Andrew, it's not necessary. I did what any brother would do. That's precisely why you deserve recognition, I replied. Besides, these funds can improve the facilities at the Pines, benefiting future residents. The notary waited for us to settle before continuing. Fifth, and this is the most complex clause. Regarding my son, Ethan Carter, I establish absolute disinheritance from the principal estate due to actions that constitute legal grounds for disinheritance, according to Section 853 of the Civil Code. Specifically, severe psychological mistreatment, misappropriation of assets, and deliberate abandonment. The room fell completely silent. Even having discussed this extensively, hearing it formalized was stunning. However, the notary proceeded, reading carefully, I establish an extraordinary possibility of redemption through the strict fulfillment of the following conditions over an uninterrupted period of 5 years. 1. Complete 60 verified monthly hours of community service in nursing homes, personally attending to residents with dementia, paralysis, or conditions requiring intensive care. That specification was deliberate. Ethan had to experience firsthand what it means to care for the vulnerable elderly he himself planned to abandon. 2. Attend weekly psychological therapy with a certified professional, submitting verifiable quarterly reports of genuine progress. 3. Fully restitute every dollar misappropriated, including the $15,400 from the sold Mercedes, the $48,000 from Beatrice's account, and the expenses documented by Sarah, totaling $123,000. Total to be restituted, $186,800. Through minimum monthly payments of $3,000. Evan had calculated that those payments would take more than 5 years to complete, ensuring a sustained commitment. 4. Submit a monthly letter of authentic reflection on his actions, no less than 2 pages, demonstrating a progressive understanding of the harm caused and genuine moral growth. These letters will be evaluated by a committee of 3 independent psychologists appointed by the executor. If Ethan Carter fulfills absolutely all of these conditions for 5 consecutive years without fail, Sarah Carter will be authorized, not obligated, to provide him with a monthly pension of $1,200 through a trust administered by her. This pension is sufficient for a dignified but modest survival, teaching the value of money earned through effort and humility. Sarah spoke for the first time. Grandpa, what if Dad rejects these conditions? Then he will receive exactly what he gave me at the Pines. Nothing. $0. But he will have had the choice. He will have known the path to redemption, and if he chooses not to take it, it will be a conscious decision that reflects his true character. The notary concluded the reading. Sixth, I name Evan Shaw as the primary executor of this will, granting him an additional $50,000 for this labor, which I anticipate will be complex and prolonged. Seventh, the apartment in this neighborhood is left to Sarah as her personal residence, non-transferable for 10 years. Eighth, all expenses of this will shall be covered by a $30,000 reserve designated specifically. Do you wish to add any final personal statement? The notary asked. I had prepared this mentally for weeks. Yes. Let the record state, this will is not born from hatred, but from a paternal love that recognizes its limits. I spent 72 years protecting my son from consequences, believing that love meant a shield against reality. I learned, painfully, that true love sometimes requires allowing consequences to teach lessons that words never could. If Ethan completes the conditions for redemption, he will demonstrate a genuine transformation worthy of a second chance. If not, he will live knowing he had that chance and refused it. In either case, I will have done my final duty as a father, offering a path to salvation without guaranteeing he would take it. I signed every page with a firm signature. Evan and Jake signed as witnesses. The notary applied the official seals. He registered the document in the notarial protocol. A certified copy was deposited in the General Registry of Last Wills and Testaments. It is legally formalized, the notary announced. From this moment, upon the testator's passing, these provisions are binding and irrevocable. We left the notary's office into the sunny September afternoon. Sarah walked between Jake and me, her arm linked with mine. Grandpa, what do you think Dad will do when he finds out? I don't know, my girl, but it's no longer my responsibility to predict or control his reactions. I planted the seed. I provided the water and light through these conditions. Whether it sprouts or dies depends entirely on him. Evan took us to lunch at a quiet restaurant. During the meal, we discussed practical realities. Natalie had finalized the divorce 3 days after the preliminary hearing, taking half of the remaining marital assets and leaving Ethan with significant legal debts. The family business Ethan inherited from Beatrice was technically bankrupt. Creditors were initiating foreclosure proceedings. Ethan had lost everything: family, reputation, financial stability, social respect. Sarah reported he was living alone in a modest rented apartment in a working-class suburb, working as an administrative assistant at a hospital, earning $1,800 a month, a fall from an ostentatious executive to a basic employee in 5 months, precisely what he needed to experience. The criminal process will conclude in November, Evan explained. The prosecutor is seeking a 5-year prison sentence, but given that you are an elderly victim, an aggravating circumstance could increase the penalty. More likely is 3 effective years with 2 conditional, if he accepts guilt and avoids a prolonged trial. And can the community service from the will be fulfilled simultaneously with a criminal sentence? Jake asked. Yes. In fact, a judge might consider that voluntary community service as a mitigating factor, demonstrating genuine remorse. It would be strategically smart for Ethan to start immediately, before sentencing. We finished lunch late. Sarah returned to the university for an afternoon class. Jake went back to the Pines for an administrative meeting. Evan and I walked slowly through the park, enjoying the perfect autumn afternoon. Andrew, you've built a brilliant legal architecture, Evan commented. But the emotional architecture, how are you handling it? I sat on a bench facing the pond. Some days I wake up, momentarily forgetting what happened, reaching for the phone to call Ethan and chat like we used to. Then I remember, and it hurts like a fresh wound. Other days I feel relief for having finally acted after years of educational negligence. It's contradictory, complex, painful, but necessary. Do you think he'll meet the conditions? Honestly, I don't know. Part of me hopes so, desperately. Another part is preparing for one final disappointment. But that uncertainty is precisely the point. He must choose. I can't force a transformation. I can only create the conditions that make it possible. We sat until the sun began to set, painting the sky in oranges and pinks. Life went on, indifferent to human dramas. And I, for the first time in decades, felt at peace with the decisions I had made, regardless of the final outcome. 11 months after that devastating Tuesday in March, when my son abandoned me at the Pines, I sat on the balcony of my apartment, watching February arrive with a cool breeze and clear skies. It was Sunday morning, and the square below was filling with families strolling, old men feeding pigeons, children chasing balls. Ordinary life. Beautiful, in its simplicity. Jake would arrive in half an hour for our weekly lunch, which had become a sacred tradition. Sarah was studying for her final exams in her last year of psychology, but promised to visit that afternoon. My life had found a quiet, modest rhythm, deeply satisfying in ways that years of abundance never achieved. The final trial had concluded in November. As Evan predicted, Ethan accepted a negotiated plea, avoiding a lengthy process. The sentence: 3.5 years in prison with 2 suspended, meaning he would serve 18 effective months if he maintained good behavior, plus 500 hours of mandatory community service in geriatric institutions. Natalie received 2 years probation for complicity and bribery, avoiding prison time but leaving her with a permanent criminal record. The family business closed for good in December. Creditors liquidated the assets, covering barely 60% of the debts. Ethan emerged from that financial shipwreck with nothing but the clothes on his back and the psychological burden of having destroyed his mother's legacy. But something unexpected happened in January that I was still processing emotionally. Sarah called me one afternoon, her voice thick with contained emotion. "Grandpa, I need to tell you something about Dad, but I don't know how you'll react." My heart sped up. "Tell me, Sarah. Whatever it is." I started volunteering at the Our Lady of Pilar Hospice as part of my university practicum. It's a place where patients with advanced Alzheimer's and severe dementia receive palliative care. I work there Tuesdays and Thursdays in the afternoons. And, Grandpa, I found Dad there. I stopped breathing for a moment. "What?" "He's volunteering, Grandpa, not the mandatory service from his court sentence. He does that at another supervised location. This is extra, genuine volunteering that no one is forcing him to do." I saw him helping an elderly man in his 80s to eat slowly, wiping his mouth with infinite patience, talking to him sweetly, even though the man didn't respond coherently. He didn't see me at first. I watched for 20 minutes before I approached him. "And what did you say?" I asked him what he was doing there. "Grandpa," he cried, "he said he needed to understand that every night since the hearing, he dreams of you locked up in the pines, alone, scared, abandoned, that those images haunt him without rest. He said the only way to find anything resembling peace was to experience firsthand what it means to care for the vulnerable elderly he planned to discard." Tears were rolling down my cheeks without permission. How long has he been doing this? The coordinator at the hospice told me he started in November, right after the sentencing. He goes 5 afternoons a week, 70 to 80 hours a month, much more than the 60 required by your will. He does it without publicity, without seeking credit. He just shows up, works quietly, and leaves. That information haunted me for weeks. Part of me wanted to believe it as a genuine sign of transformation. Another part remained skeptical, remembering past manipulations. Was it real repentance or a calculated performance to eventually claim the conditional inheritance? Evan advised caution. "Andrew, 11 months don't erase 45 years of behavioral patterns. Observe, document, but don't get your hopes up prematurely. Real transformation takes years to verify." Jake was more optimistic. "I have seen genuine redemption in people. It's not common, but it happens. Maybe hitting bottom so brutally finally woke something up in him." Sarah provided me with monthly reports. Ethan continued his volunteering without fail. He had started weekly psychological therapy with a doctor specializing in the rehabilitation of family abuse perpetrators. He lived in a tiny 30 square meter apartment. He worked his administrative job without complaint, cooked simple meals, read books on gerontology at night. He also learned about the will through his lawyer, whom Evan formally contacted. His reaction, according to Sarah, who saw him afterward, was a complete emotional collapse. "I don't even deserve that chance," he said between sobs, "but I will take it. I will dedicate the rest of my life to trying to become the man Dad always believed I could be." In February, Sarah brought me a manila envelope. "Grandpa, Dad asked me to give this to you. He doesn't know if you'll read it, but he needed to write it." Inside was an 8-page handwritten letter, trembling handwriting, dried tear stains visible on the paper. I began to read in the privacy of my room that night. "Dad, I have no right to call you that after what I did, but you are the only thing you ever were. My father. I, on the other hand, stopped being your son the day I called you human waste. Those words, which I thought would give me power, have become chains I carry day and night. Every elderly man I help feed at the hospice has your face. Every trembling hand I hold is yours, which I refused. Every confused look from a dementia patient reminds me of the monstrous lie I invented about you. I don't sleep for more than 3 hours at a time. Nightmares are my only deserved company. I'm not writing to ask for forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. I'm writing because Dr. Alvarez, my therapist, says I must face the complete truth. I destroyed the noblest man I ever knew for a greed so stupid that I now don't understand how I could value money over your love. Mom would be devastated. Sarah looks at me with pity more than love. I lost everything, and that should be punishment enough. But it's not. Because worse than losing material things is waking up every day, knowing I betrayed the only being who loved me unconditionally. I have started to pay back the money. $3,000 a month from my $1,800 salary. I live on $700. I eat rice, lentils, bread. I walk 4 kilometers to work every day to save on transport. I am selling my remaining possessions. Not because of the will's obligation, but because I don't deserve comfort while you suffered because of me. Jake visited the hospice where I volunteer. He saw me from afar, without me knowing, Sarah told me later. She said he would report to you. I don't know if that matters. I do this because every time I hold the hand of an abandoned old man, I imagine it's yours, which I let go of so cruelly. And in those moments, for brief seconds, I feel something close to a purpose. Dad, if you read this, I just want you to know, you are right not to believe me yet. I don't believe me either. But I will keep trying every day, for years if necessary, to become someone who maybe, someday far away, deserves to look you in the eye again, without dying of shame. Your son who stopped being one, but begs to be able to earn that title back. Ethan. I folded the letter slowly, placing it in my desk drawer, next to old photographs of Ethan as a child. I didn't know what to feel. Pain, hope, skepticism, wounded love, all mixed in a tangle, impossible to unravel. When Jake arrived for lunch, I showed him the letter. He read it completely, leaving it on the table with a deep sigh. Andrew, this could be sophisticated manipulation, or it could be a genuine awakening. Only time will tell. I know. But Jake, for the first time in months, I feel something I thought was dead. A microscopic hope that my son is not completely lost. Paula arrived that afternoon with additional news. She had spoken extensively with Dr. Alvarez, Ethan's therapist, who, with her patient's permission, shared her professional perspective. Your father is experiencing what we call a post-traumatic existential crisis. The weight of his actions crushed him psychologically. He is in a genuine, painful process of deconstructing his ego and reconstructing his values. I don't guarantee success, but the effort is authentic. The following months continued in a similar pattern. Ethan maintained his job, volunteering, therapy, and restitution payments. No failures, no excuses, no publicity. Paula kept me informed but respected my need for emotional distance. In April, almost a full year since the nightmare began, I received a second letter from Ethan, shorter, more focused. It detailed lessons learned while caring for Don Ricardo, an 7-year-old patient with terminal Alzheimer's, who believed Ethan was his deceased son. I hug him, Dad. I let him call me Michael. I give him the comfort I denied you, and every hug is my penance and my education. That night, for the first time, I considered the possibility of an eventual reconciliation. Not now, maybe not for years, but someday, if Ethan continued on this path, perhaps we could share a coffee in silence. It wouldn't erase the past. I would never forget. But maybe, just maybe, we would find something new, built on the ruins of what was destroyed. I stood up from the balcony as Jake knocked on the door. Life went on, day after day. Paula was thriving, graduating with honors and accepting a job at the Elder Protection Foundation. Jake and I were planning a trip to Austin to revisit the building we built 4 decades ago. I was writing my memoirs, documenting this experience, hoping to help other elders facing similar betrayals. And somewhere in the city, my son was cleaning the incontinence of an unknown old man, finally learning what human dignity means. I didn't know if this story would have a happy ending. Maybe it didn't deserve one. But it had something more valuable, an honest ending, where consequences taught lessons that blind love never could. And that, I discovered, was enough to let me sleep in peace. If you liked this story, give the video a like, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions in the comments. To hear the next story, click on the box on the left. Thanks for watching.